Welcome to Tell It Like It Is. I'm Gary Polland. This show is a fresh look at politics and public affairs. Here we will give you the real deal, not bias or spin, or the major media's politically correct opinions masquerading as facts. When we provide you opinions, you will know it. This show rejects politically correct uniformity. This disease is a terminal threat for our democracy and our freedom. The anti-American mobs out there are not appeasable, and they're not going away. They now threaten in reaction to the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court to shut down the streets. Or as Reza Asian said, he said, quote, if they try to replace RBG, we will burn the entire effing thing down. Well, you know what that means, folks. Last week, 2 more police officers shot on duty, this time in Louisville, and irresponsible leftists are bonding these dangerous criminals out of jail while they want to defund the police and disarm you, the law-abiding citizen. You may not think these events matter to you, but to be clear, our country is their target, and the destruction of our American way of life is their goal. Now for today's show. My first guest is Gary Bauer. Gary heads Campaign for Working Families. He puts out a daily newsletter called End of Day, which is one of the great newsletters available, and it's free, and you go to his website. He'll tell you at the end where to get it. He gives you insight as to what's really going on in Washington and not the spin you get from the major media. And this was a very big weekend for Gary and his group because they had the Value Voters Summit and other things that we're going to be talking about. So, Gary, let's first talk about the Value Voters Summit. How'd that go?
Great to be with you, by the way.
Great to have you, as always. How was the Values Voters Summit? This is usually people come to Washington in person. You get thousands and thousands of pro-family, pro-faith voters to come and hear great speakers and meet leaders in Washington. This time it was virtual.
It was virtual, and look, everybody in America is making adjustments, right? Whether it's how we do schooling, how we do our jobs, et cetera. And people that put on annual conferences have had to go through the same process. Christians United for Israel did it a little earlier this year, put on their huge event, all by virtual and social media. And this past weekend, we did the same thing with the Values Voter Summit. From everything I can tell, Gary, it went well. It was a little unusual. We taped some sessions earlier and then played them on various nights, but we actually ended up with a bigger audience than we usually end up with. There were thousands of people that signed on to watch the conference on YouTube and Zoom and all the other ways you can do that, and we're getting a lot of great feedback.
Did you detect an enthusiasm among the members of the Value Voters Summit for this election and wanting to turn out and vote to stop the extreme left from taking over the country?
Yes. Gary, the polls, they say one thing. There's all kinds of disturbing news stories, but I think the one thing that it's tough for the left to lie about is the incredible enthusiasm at the conservative grassroots. And we saw it this weekend at both the Values Voter Summit and then some other events that happened here in Washington. But you can also see it around the country. There are these Trump parades of tractors in Iowa, boats in Ocean City, Maryland, trucks in Detroit, Michigan. These things are unbelievable, and they're being put together regularly. And I don't know whether you can say that translates into victory on Election Day, but it certainly translates into the fact that millions of people in this country want to give the president 4 more years to complete the agenda he has set out to do.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting, we talk about Trump and what he's done. If you look at his track record, he really has accomplished a lot and is focused on keeping his promises. Now, you could say there's some things about Trump you don't like this style, you don't like that style, but look, he is not running for saint, he's not running for pope, he's running for president of the United States. Anyone who tells you that Donald Trump is perfect or Joe Biden or any politician is just, well, Gary Bauer, when he ran for president, he was probably close to being perfect. But beyond that, they're human beings, and they have their good things and they have their bad things. And the most amazing thing going on, I think, in this election, and you, of course, write about it almost every day, is that the major left-wing media in this country is on a jihad to get rid of Donald Trump. Every day there is another story, often made up, often exaggerated, and the warts that Joe Biden has, and he has his share of them, you don't hear anything about it. We saw the Senate report that came out last week about Joe Biden's son and the millions of dollars he was able to collect, trading on his dad's position, riding on Air Force Two when his dad went to China and the Ukraine and the like. And the media doesn't cover it. They don't cover any of it. Or the fact that Joe Biden has slowed down considerably and probably doesn't have what it takes to be president today. Nothing. Crickets. Unless you go to the conservative media. It's incredible, Gary. Go ahead.
I would say it is incredible, and it's very dangerous. You know, the freedom of the press is something that we've always cherished. It's in our Constitution, and it's something that makes this country better than a lot of other places around the world. But when you have a right guaranteed in the Constitution, it comes with a responsibility. We've always expected newspapers and editorial boards at TV stations to have a point of view. But when the actual news stories themselves are being manipulated, and almost 99% of the time, always manipulated in the direction of promoting the left-wing worldview, that's unacceptable. And I think you can see the effect of that as the standing of the media drops further and further in the public's mind. But it's a tremendous handicap for President Trump specifically to overcome, and for conservatives generally. It doesn't matter whether you're a values conservative, a libertarian conservative, an economic conservative, a strong national defense conservative, whatever part of the conservative movement that you're in. Every one of those groups of the conservative movement have to deal with this over-the-top hostility that twists what we believe, distorts our viewpoints, and generally makes it very difficult for us to communicate with the American people.
Yeah, but it's interesting. You would think that the major media would try to show a semblance of balance, so when they decided to go after a Donald Trump, they would have more credibility, right? But they don't. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons why so many Americans are turning off the major media. They're canceling their newspaper subscriptions. They don't watch the major TV networks' news. They're not interested in their spin on everything. I mean, Time Magazine, which I continue to read because I'm interested in how they see the world, I mean, their lenses are far left. There's no semblance of balance or fairness at all. It is gone. And we're different, Gary. So the second half of my show today is a lawyer, author. His name is David Berg. I call him a traditional liberal, and I think his opinion is worth hearing from. So that's why I'm having him on the show. He'll tell it like it is. But if you look at what's going on at MSNBC, CNNBC, and the like, CNN, you don't get any balance at all. None.
Well, Gary, one of the things I'm struck by, and I know you are too, I mean, so here the left has this near monopoly on how people get the news that they seek or the information they seek. There's only a few places. I mean, your show's obviously one of them. Broadly speaking, Fox News is one. And then we have conservative talk radio generally, Christian talk radio. But it's really a handful of things, and yet the left tries to shut down even those things. Every year there's a study about what kind of speakers get to go on American university campuses to give the graduation speeches, or to speak at a political science department. And there's only a handful of times on major universities that they'll invite a conservative speaker. And when they do invite a conservative speaker and that speaker shows up, they're shouted down. They have to bring in extra security. Often the event is canceled because the university is worried about violence. It just seems like time and time again, the left doesn't want to debate. They want a monopoly on only their worldview being acceptable to express in the public square. And of course, if that ever completely happens, where they have a monopoly, they're close to it now, that will be the death of the American Republic. You've got to be able to have two or three or four competing visions for the American people to be able to make rational judgments about which direction they want to go to on many of the important issues.
I think the interest is just shutting down debate. Oh, you're a
Yes.
conservative. We shouldn't listen to you. But, we keep up the good fight. Okay, you were there for the introduction of Amy Coney Barrett, you and your wife, Carol. Tell us about how that was.
Gary, it was just a remarkable day. The White House had the event outside because of, again, the coronavirus era we're in, and it's easier to do these events outside. The weather held up. The president and first lady walk out from the White House, and the 200 or so people that had gathered, we jumped to our feet and start applauding. And Gary, I have to tell you, I couldn't help but think as I watched this wonderful American family. Just, really, you could just tell wonderful people. And this is the culmination in many ways of decades of work by the conservative movement. I know you remember Robert Bork, which ended in a disaster
Absolutely.
for him and for his family. Then we had the terrible attacks that took place against Justice Clarence Thomas. I was fortunate to be able to head up the Citizens Committee to confirm Clarence Thomas. So that was a battle we won. But it's been years and years of these kinds of conflicts, and now we get this one more chance to replace a really left-wing justice. I mean, a justice that was probably as far left as you could possibly get on the Supreme Court.
And you mentioned that, Gary. Let me take it aside.
Sure.
And Judge Ginsburg was also a lovely lady. And when she was up for confirmation,
Yes.
they didn't run her through the ringer because they didn't like her left-wing positions. The Republicans, for the most part, said, well, she does have a distinguished record as a lawyer and as a former judge. And so she's qualified to be on the Supreme Court. Now we come to Kavanaugh, we come to Barrett, and the Democrats are saying, let's see, not that she's not qualified as a jurist, or because she is a brilliant lawyer, she was a brilliant law professor. She's Wonder Woman as far as I could tell in terms of what she has done with her family and her career. And by the way, that becomes a threat to the feminist movement in the country who said you can't have it all because it looks like Amy Coney Barrett has had it all. It hasn't been easy. I'm sure the lady gets up early and goes to bed late, but she's a remarkable woman. And they're going to attack her because she's Catholic, right? They're going to attack her because for the most part, except for Joe Biden and a handful of others, Catholics are pro-life, certainly on that issue, etc. So they're going to go after her. They're going to attack her personally. And the thing I'm looking forward to is Kamala Harris coming in and trying to put her through her paces, Judge Barrett, because I think I really believe they let her, and one of the requests, Gary, they made was let her have all the time. Let her and Barrett just go at it. I think it'll be the end of the race for Biden and Harris. I think they will be exposed to being out of touch with mainstream America.
I agree. I agree, Gary. Look, I think Judge Barrett's family is sort of an indictment of the entire liberal agenda. So here is this very accomplished woman, and yet she and her husband have 5 biological children. The left likes to say or falsely accuse conservatives and conservative Christians as being racist, which is ridiculous. But here's this conservative Catholic family, and they've adopted 2 children from Haiti. They're standing up there together. All the children look happy. As you point out, Judge Barrett I don't know what she'll do on Roe versus Wade. We'll have to see in the years ahead. But I know that her personal view is that she believes that innocent unborn life should be protected. So her nomination and her whole life, her whole family, is an indictment of the left wing worldview. And Gary, in her comments at the White House, where she was very gracious, she was very gracious in her comments uh, about Justice Ginsburg, who passed away. But she said something in her remarks, and I'm not sure she completely understood how much of an affront what she said would be to today's American political left. She said, just in passing, I love America and I love our Constitution. Well, my goodness, for a lot of people in the nutty left right now, that's like fingers on a chalkboard saying that you love America and love our Constitution.
Well, clearly the Democrats have a double standard. I think that the president, as you probably agree, was right to go forward. And Joe Biden, if he has options, he can certainly release his list of who he'd like to appoint to the court, which, by the way, he hasn't done. Because there are rumors that the person toward the top of the list is Stacey Abrams, you know, the once and future governor of Georgia, the state legislator with virtually no significant legal experience. That's who they think is qualified. So not only is she ideologically out there, she's not qualified based on experience. So they don't want to talk about that. So instead, let them go after Amy Coney Barrett. Good luck. I think they're gonna rue the day they took on this Class Act judge. I really do. Okay, let's talk about debate tonight. Okay.
Okay.
And you got Biden, who has been coming off the campaign trail at 9 in the morning every day, it seems, lately. I mean, he really hadn't campaigned much at all because I think because he just doesn't have the energy. I expect that what they were probably trying to do is manipulate his body clock, because at night I'm sure that Biden is on empty, sleeping in the couch in his basement in his place in Delaware. So they've tried to adjust it so he can handle the debate process. But, you know, he also had some good debates against the Democrats. He was okay. It'll be interesting to see how he does. Interesting to see if Trump is focused and comes across as someone who knows what he's doing. Maybe Trump just ought to ignore Biden and talk about what he's accomplished, you know? And I don't know. And well, I guess, go ahead.
I think that last comment you made, Gary, would be good advice. I mean, I've passed on my view to our friends at the White House that the president's got an incredible record. I mean, the idea that Joe Biden, who in 47 years didn't accomplish what the president's accomplished in 47 months, I think that's a great way for President Trump to approach the debate. I also agree with you. I wouldn't underestimate Biden. Look, he's been in a lot of debates. If he's had a good night's sleep, maybe a good day's sleep too, you know, and he memorizes a few sound bites. He should be able to do well. Now, there was a story earlier today, Gary, that the Biden campaign was insisting that there be 10-minute breaks tonight, every 30 minutes of the debate. And that's just outlandish. I mean, when I heard that, I thought, good grief, is Biden going to show up in a robe and slippers? I mean, what? It's only a 90-minute debate. You can't have a 10-minute break every 30 minutes.
Yeah, so that went over like a lead balloon, right?
Yes.
All right, Gary, and we're down to the last 2 minutes. There's been a lot of news out there about ballot by mail that the Democrats are pushing. They want to keep moving the deadlines back further and further, which I describe as the U.S.-Russian basketball game, which you remember years ago. We had won in regulation, but then they called fouls, and they extended the clock basically till the Soviet Union won. And I'm afraid that's what the Democratic plan here is. We're just going to keep going until we get enough, then we're going to call the game over.
Yeah, Gary, you're right, and this is a huge deal, because if the day after the election day, or if 4 weeks after the election day, half of the country decides that they were cheated in the election, the only people that will be happy about that are people like Putin in China, Putin in Russia, Xi in China. America's enemies will rejoice if they see that half of America thinks an election was stolen from them. And I think everything is pointing to that's exactly what the left is trying to do this coming November.
Well, I will tell you, in Harris County, there's a story out today that Rush talked about on his radio show, was about their attempt to do massive vote by mail with ballots. They want to send out 2.5 million ballots to every registered voter in Harris County, Houston, Texas, whether they requested them or not, whether they're over 65 or not, whether or not they're still alive or not, whether they still live in the county or not, because the voter rolls have not been cleaned up for years and years. And it was uncovered and released today that they were also planning to do massive vote harvesting, which I call vote stealing. And they were planning on stealing hundreds of thousands of votes with this plan. So I said, Rush talked about it today. You may follow up on it and read about it and get the information. It's unbelievable. The good news is the news is starting to get out. Major media so far not covering it, but you're not going to expect that. But it may end up on Fox News tonight. It's out there. So that's a kind of an interesting story. My line on that, Gary, is why are they trying so hard to steal the election if they think they're ahead by 10 points everywhere? And you know the answer.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. They claim that they got this big lead, and yet all these things that they're doing point to people that are running scared that the president's going to have 4 more years to do what he wants to do on the economy, to rebuild our military,
Right.
continue to transform the courts, and all the rest of what's really been a great agenda.
Has been. Well, Gary Bauer, thank you so much. Where can people get the daily report?
They can go to
day.
cwf.com, cwfpac.com.
And that, folks, is essential reading. Gary Bauer, we are blessed that Gary Bauer is in Washington spending his life fighting for our freedom. Thank you, Gary
Thank
Bauer.
you.
And we'll be back after these messages.
I'm a Texas voter,
And I plan to vote by mail-in ballot.
I'm a Texas voter.
and I plan to vote safely in person.
I'm a Texas voter.
And I plan to vote early.
I am a Texas voter.
And I plan to vote safely in person. In this coming election, voters aged 50 plus
Will make all the difference.
Will make the difference.
Will make the difference.
Will make the difference.
will make the difference in elections across the state.
So make a plan now.
So you can vote however you choose.
It doesn't matter
Where you vote,
How you vote, or who you vote for.
What matters
What matters.
What matters?
is that you have a plan to vote.
For more information,
head to
aarp.org/tx.
vote.
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 Đi bầu cử.
और वोट करना मत भूलिएगा।
Vote.
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 唔該，去投票。
Ron Carter Cadillac, Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, delivers test drives to your home or office, like the new 2020 XT4 Premium Luxury, only $359 a month, the new 2020 XT5 Premium Luxury Collection, $399 a month, or the first ever 2020 XT6 Premium Luxury Collection, just $499 a month, all for 39 months lease with just $1 down, or purchase and choose 0.9% APR for 60 months plus $1,500 bonus cash. Visit RonCarterCadillac.com. Ron Carter Cadillac, Houston's only Cadillac to your door dealer, delivers test drives to your home or office. Enjoy a $9,500 purchase allowance and own the iconic new 2020 Escalade for only $879 a month with just $1 down and no payments for 120 days. Only at Ron Carter Cadillac, Gulf Freeway, just 2 minutes south of the Beltway. Visit RonCarterCadillac.com.
In this coming election, voters 50 plus will make the difference in elections across the state. The time is now to make a plan so you can vote how you choose in this coming election. Eligible voters can vote by mail-in ballot, and all registered voters can vote safely in person early or on voting day. Don't wait, make a plan to vote today. For more voting information, head to aarp.org. I'm Tina Knowles-Lawson, and I'm a proud voter.
Welcome back to Tell It Like It Is. In this part of the show, I have a really special guest. His name is David Berg. David Berg is a lawyer's lawyer, one of the great lawyers in America, someone I've always looked up to, someone I actually had the privilege of working on in a case or two over the things of my career. He's also an author. He's also been an activist Democrat. I see him more as a traditional liberal, but I think his opinion is important to hear on Tell It Like It Is. So David Berg, welcome from the secluded facility in East Hampton, New York.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to see you, Gary.
Okay, so David, we are living in a strange era, obviously. You had described while we talked before going on the air that you basically moved to East Hampton in March when the COVID crisis became acute, like actually a lot of New Yorkers moved to Hamptons when the crisis got bad. And getting out of Houston was probably a good idea also. But it has really kind of changed the world we live in, and it has become, I think, in terms of our politics, kind of strange. I mean, I kind of feel like we're living in this weird world of where we have people running for office that are older than we are, number one. Number two, that are not necessarily who you'd pick if you could pick anyone in America to lead this country. And I wanted to ask you first, how did we end up with the state of politics that we have today?
You know, Gary, I wish I knew the answer. I do think the president has been very angry and very divisive. He has not united the country, starting with his inaugural address, which was weird when he talked about the American carnage has got to end now, right here and now. But Democrats are at fault too. I don't want to say we're not. I think that there's just too much of an influence of big money in politics. I think there's an influence of lobbying that was not there as I grew up. When I grew up, the word lobbyist was a pejorative. And now you've got lobbyists who write the legislation. You've got divisions that have been stoked by the Russians, by bots, by the president, and by the parties. And I think we're at a very dangerous and tipping point in our nation's history.
Does it seem to you, I mean, at least it does to me, growing up, I actually admired politicians. I thought they were really special. They were leaders. And of course, growing up, I mean, it's Dwight Eisenhower, it's John F. Kennedy, and then you had Humphrey and Nixon, not as good, but you still had people you could respect. And you thought people who got to Congress or people who became U.S. senators, that was really special. You were really a special person. You could do a lot for the country. And you would find that there were actually friendships among Democrats and Republicans in Washington. And the partisanship has gotten so bad, and like you, I blame both sides, that if you affiliate with Democrats and you're a Republican, you're terrible. If you're a Democrat who plays footsies with Republicans, you're awful and can't be trusted. We need to primary you out of a political existence. That's what's happened, of course. When we do that, we've now encouraged the behavior as both parties are at loggerheads and basically can't agree the sun's shining.
There's a couple of factors at work. One is neither benign. What we have are congressmen, both in both houses, men and women have to spend their entire day raising funds, raising money. That's one problem. And they go home after 3 days in D.C. And I've spoken to former members of the Congress who've said that when they were there, they lived and worked near their friends on the opposite side of the aisle. It's like when we were young, there used to be a place in Houston called the Inns of Court. And after a long day of litigating and trying cases against each other, we would go there and have a drink. We'd have great fun together, and then we go back the next day and try to kill each other in the courtroom. The other factor, Gary, I wonder if you agree with this. John Kennedy stood as a hallmark of public service. He extolled those. He wrote a book, Profiles in Courage, which you know, that extolled public service. But in the decades since then, I've read a couple of polls that said that trust in government has gone from 70% down to 17, now 7%. And I think people just don't see government service as the same high honor it once was, and we're not attracting the best and brightest. I honestly cannot listen to. I used to live for the Sunday morning TV shows, and I'd wait to hear what the politicians had to say. I can't stand to hear politicians on either side talk.
And I agree with you. Those Sunday talk shows, I mean, the hosts are terrible. They're biased and prejudiced. If you're a Republican, they don't like you, but but nobody answers the questions anyway. You know, David, thinking about the state of the country, think about who's running. If you had told me this year that the Democrats were running David Berg for president of the United States, I'd say, you know, David Berg is a smart, policy-oriented liberal and is someone you can probably work with. I mean, he understands give and take. He understands progress. Now, that you could consider that an endorsement, which may be the kiss of death for any political career you're thinking
your
about,
show
David.
Is done.
Yeah.
You're through.
But you would. But the thing is, you know, in the tradition of John F. Kennedy, you would bring things to the table to help the country. Now you look at what we're going with here. Everyone's at loggerheads. Everyone's attacking everybody. The major media is totally sold out for the left, when they would have so much more credibility if they gave fair and balanced coverage and then gave their opinions if they agreed with the Democrats. Okay. But instead, it's just totally unfair, totally biased, totally with an attitude, which means, here's the bad thing with that. What happens is my friends, my conservative friends, David, are not interested in what the liberals have to say anymore. They've tuned them out. That's a bad thing. And it's bad because conservatives don't have a monopoly on political wisdom. They really don't, nor do liberals. Both of them actually have some ideas that would be good for the country, and that I see as the biggest problem of all. One of the things I've prided myself, and I'm sure you do the same, I read liberal publications. I read them because they sometimes have good ideas, and I want to know what ideas they're sharing. I was a charter subscriber to Washington Monthly. Washington Monthly was a neoliberal. Now it's just it's a liberal magazine. But they have some really good ideas from time to time in there that people should be considering. And it's true likewise with the conservative press and media. There are ideas that are worth talking about, but nobody's talking to each other. Nancy Pelosi, McCarthy, the Republican minority leader, they don't barely talk. They don't like each other. They have nothing to do with each other. So no wonder we have these votes that it's one party or another voting for or against and no input. That's how we ended up, by the way, with Obamacare.
Say the last thing again.
That's how we ended up with Obamacare. We'll pass it without any. Part of the problem was the Republicans said, we're not going to work with you. And the Democrats said, screw it. We'll pass it without you. And then there's no bipartisanship at all. So that's a problem.
My own view about the media is that Rupert Murdoch has had the worst effect on the body politic in the history of the country. He has been fair and balanced is an ironic statement if you listen to Sean Hannity. Now, I want to make a distinction, though. The news department itself at Fox, which Trump hates, is very straightforward. Chris Wallace, Shep Smith, who I think is going over to CNBC. Right. But that's why Democrats, liberal Democrats like me, no longer listen to conservatives because one of the things this president has done for people like me is make me appreciate even more the center right and center left of this country. Number one. Number two, the lack of who said the art of politics is compromise? One of the founding fathers. And of course, at my age, I have no idea who that would be. But one of the things that has happened between the second thing that has made us that we are very aware of at this point in our history is what we want in a president. I wouldn't press you for this, but Donald Trump seems to me to be ill-suited entirely for the presidency. I understand how he got elected. I have a good feeling for that and how people were alienated and disregarded and regarded as flyover country. But I also, Gary, I think that there's an element that we have to confront, and that is that the Republican Party is now the Trump Party. It is not the Republican Party that you have spent your life promoting.
Yes. Yeah, well, I will tell you this. I did vote for Trump. He was my 16th choice for president on the Republican ticket. because, of course, because I didn't know what the guy believed in. If you objectively look at his record from the conservative standpoint, there's a number of things he's done that are really positive. He's done some good things, and there's some things that he's done that I have trouble with. But that would be true of any president, even Ronald Reagan, who was my hero. There are things he did I didn't like. But what I think part of Trump's problem is he's almost the personality suited to the era. You think about this, David, because the media, yeah, they're really ugly toward him, and he's pretty ugly toward the media too. But if you go back and you look, the media didn't treat George W. Bush good, and the media didn't treat Papa Bush good. The media didn't treat Reagan good. So fair enough. And then on the other side, you have the political attacks, and the Democrats are going to say, we were not nice to Bill Clinton, right? Who, by the way, when you start looking at it, he was really a really good president. He compromised and he got stuff done. He may not have been the perfect human being, neither is Trump or Biden, but he was a good president. But since then, they've kind of gone after each other. So Obama, his complaint was, as he gets elected, and Mitch McConnell says, I'm going to spend the next 4 years doing all I can to beat you. As opposed to saying, we offer to work with the president and we will compromise, but it's a two-way street, which what they should have said. And Obama's response to McConnell's comment was basically, bring it on, Bubba, let's go, right? So you go and you switch, and then it becomes this battle where they fight and can't agree the sun's shining. Let's move on to the Supreme Court. David, you're a lawyer. Answer me this question. You're a fine lawyer. Answer me this question. You had Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is what a wonderful lady, okay? She was a great lawyer. She was a great judge. I happen to not agree with her decisions or her political positions, but she was a terrific judge. She was well qualified, and a lot of Republicans voted for her when she was nominated because she was well qualified. There's no difference between her and Amy Coney Barrett. None. Amy is a terrific judge, a terrific lawyer, just happens to have opposite legal opinions from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So if we use the Ruth Bader Ginsburg standard that was used to vote, the vote for Amy would be overwhelming. Overwhelming. Now, it won't be because the Democrats are voting no because they don't like her judicial beliefs, bottom line. So we've kind of changed how that is. I fully suspect she will be on the court. And heck, my last guest, Gary Bauer, he said, I don't know how she's going to vote on abortion or Roe versus Wade. I got no idea, because she's involved with precedent. She likes precedent. So maybe she'll decide that's what's precedent. It's precedent. So we're going to leave it alone. But regardless, isn't it really off-putting for the Democrats to go after her because of her beliefs or attacking her because she's Catholic? I mean, come on.
Let's back up a bit. You've left out one objection Democrats have to her being nominated, and that was the way that Mitch McConnell kept Garrett. Now I've forgotten his name. Who did Obama nominate?
Merrick
Garland. Yeah, this is unprincipled, Gary. There is no principle involved. This is raw power. They are hypocrites for they being Mitch McConnell and the Republicans for nominating anyone this close to the election. They said they wouldn't do it when the nomination that Obama made came in March of that year. It was months ahead.
Yeah, and to be fair, David, they can make a distinction in the differences, but I actually agree with you. I think they should have interviewed him and had a hearing. You want to vote no, right?
Yeah.
But then you would have established the position that you'd be in the same thing that these out of touch Democrats are doing, and we're going to vote on ideology. Merrick Garland was qualified. I agree with you. He was. He was qualified to be on the Supreme Court. I do.
But so no one should attack her for her Catholic beliefs. There are now going to be, again, 6 Catholics on the Supreme Court and 3 Jews. I would have no objection if it were 6 Jews and 3 Catholics. I'd also like it, as would you, if there's been people who actually tried lawsuits for a living. Actually, Gorsuch did.
Yeah, that would be more of those would be good. I agree.
I think, let me tell you something. I'll probably be kicked out of the Democratic Party. The reason we're going to have the nominees that we do, this will be, it's hard for me to say it, the Trump court for the
Right.
generations to come.
Yeah.
And the reason we do is because it started with minor skirmishes when Nixon nominated Haynesworth and Carswell, and they didn't make it. And then Ted Kennedy made his eloquent and disastrous and unnecessary speech about Robert Bork.
Who was well
That's
qualified.
when this became
Yeah.
well qualified. I'll talk to you sometime about his book, The Antitrust Paradox. It's a Trojan horse.
He was
Probably,
Bork sponsored me for
you'll
the
become a
Supreme Court.
Democrat after you
I
talk
might.
to me about
well,
it.
David,
And now
go ahead. Unfortunately,
we got Harry Reid,
yeah.
who used the nuclear option and blew up the supermajority requirement that it was required in history for anyone to be nominated to the court, which is why we didn't get nut jobs appointed to the Supreme Court. We got people who were center right, center left, traditionalists. And I mean, people would argue with my characterization, but we got some splendid people.
Yeah.
And now, and Harry Reid Mitch McConnell warned Reid at the time, don't do away with the supermajority, the 60 vote requirement, because we're going to be in power someday. And here we are. And Mitch McConnell, as you know, extended that rule to majority rule to Supreme Court nominees, takes 51 votes.
Right.
So I don't think that either side is wrapped in glory over this.
Well, David, our time is rapidly depleting. But before you go today, I do want to talk about your book, Run, Brother, Run. You remember this? It's
Yes,
a wonderful book. You're not only a great lawyer, you're a great writer. I guess it's available in paperback. I happen to have the hardback version. If you'd showed up in person, David, you could actually autograph the book for me. But someday you'll come back to Houston. We'll visit. David, I want to have you back after the election and talk about the aftermath. It may be we won't know who the president is for weeks and weeks and weeks. I have no idea. We'll have to see how that all works out. But thank you so much for coming on Tell It Like It Is.
Gary, I enjoyed it so much. We've been friends a long time. Our views are different, but I hope that at least in some small way, we show people this is the way America should be.
Absolutely, David. Look forward to having you back. Thanks for being with us.
Take care, buddy.
Take care. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time and place. So you can email the show at Gary Polland at AmericanStarTelevision.com. You can get my bi-weekly newsletter, the Texas Conservative Review, now in its 20th year, by signing up for free at TexasConservativeReview.com. Remember, in the immortal words of President Ronald Reagan, you and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We will preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, and we will sentence them to take the final step into 1,000 years of a new dark age. God forbid. See you next week.